Hoist the black flag high, let the cables hum. Code and cannon ready, futures beating like a drum. Charts are drawn in circuits, treasure maps and AI. We're sailing for the edge where bold ideas never die.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of Pirates Only. Typically, we have 3 hard tech founders on the pod, but today I thought it'd be really special to have founders of their own, but working on the stories, the narratives, the pieces behind the scenes for some of these companies. So today we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling and how telling the right story, especially in deep tech, can help these companies lead to better recruiting, raising capital, all of which accumulate into building, hopefully, better companies. Very happy to have 3 amazing creative guests today. We'll start with some introductions. Emily, let's kick things off with you.
I'm so excited to be here. So Emily Gold, I run OPFOR Media. We're still trying to dial in on exactly what we are because we ourselves are a startup, but essentially we help founders of deep tech companies define their narrative strategy. You know, we help with ghostwriting, help founders become thought leaders in their respective niches, and then we're also developing some original content of our own.
Love it. Federico, how about you?
Thanks again for the invite, Matt. So I'm a founder of Sentinel Studios. We specialize in creating 3D animations that make defense tech easy to understand.
Love it. Last but not least, Thomas.
Hey, I'm Thomas Kim. Thanks for having us. I'm one of the founders of Asimov Collective. We're a brand design and brand strategy studio based in Brooklyn.
Love it. So I'm excited to chat with all 3 of you today because, as I mentioned in the pre-call here, each of you are working in around the same narrative of helping these companies tell their stories, better tell their stories, but all in a unique way. So maybe, Federico, let's kick it off with maybe specifically what you're doing, dive a little deeper in how you are helping some of these deep tech, hard tech companies tell their stories.
Yeah, sure. So in our case, a lot of the founders and general companies that come to us have some innovative new defense tech that are really a little bit struggling to explain what it can actually do. So instead of the 20-page slide deck, we come in and help like the visual side of things and actually make a video that shows very clearly the operational capabilities or maybe some more specific mission critical aspect that their tech can solve. So we cover that side and varies quite a bit from maybe they need to do a presentation at the Pentagon or they need to raise the next round. So it varies a lot what they actually need the videos for at the end.
Mm-hmm. And I can speak firsthand from a VC perspective. We see a lot of pitch decks, hundreds of pitch decks per month. And the hardest part about hard tech is that it tends to be very complex. And having those visuals, the 3D visuals, they say that, a picture is, 10,000 words, 1,000 words? A 3D animation is like 1,000,000 words because it just adds a little bit more clarity, especially when the topic is so complex. So we certainly appreciate it. Thomas, how about you? A little bit deeper into what you're doing over on your side.
Yeah, I think, we chose to focus, obviously our name is named after Isaac Asimov. We are all like sci-fi nerds.
That's great.
And I think when we started the agency, we deliberately were like, let's not chase after, what every other agency chases after, which is like the Nikes, the Samsungs, the Apples. Like we all have worked with those companies in our individual careers. And we were like, what if we went into this world that seems to be getting no attention? That we think is so cool. Our first client was Palladium. They were telling stories, right? Like writing about this world kind of in the abstract. And through those guys, we met tons of like early stage founders who were working on really interesting ideas or were inspired by a lot of the things that Palladium was talking about. So, we came in and we said, as designers with like a creative eye, how do you make things like nuclear energy sexy? Because we think that that's really important. A lot of times when my friends ask me like, why is what you do important? I say, well, I think we're helping build the narrative for the new infrastructure for like the next 100 years versus like, I think the work that agencies do for these major consumer companies are very beautiful and cool, but I'm like, I've seen that, you're rewriting that script essentially. Versus nuclear, I'm like, there's no precedent. It's actually really hard for us to recruit sometimes because, a designer can show me a portfolio of like all of these super beautiful poppy colors, whatever. of consumer technology. And then I'm like, okay, now think about infrastructure and B2B. How do you make manufacturing sexy? How do you make drilling cool? And it's really hard, like a really hard thing to think about. And so we love diving into the technical aspect of like, how does this work? Okay, we understand the like paper stack of things. Now, how do we regurgitate it to the public in a way that makes sense? And for them to go, oh, I get it. We call it like the grandma rule. Like it should make sense to a grandma and she should get it. And then we love when we have to pair it with our visuals, which is like the idealistic part of all of it, right? It's like, okay, we've perfected the words. Now what's the kind of aspirational vision that the company wants to set? And then what's the like detailed view of whatever product or idea that they are selling, and how do we demonstrate it?
I love that. That's well said, and I agree. I love the so easy that a grandmother could understand it, because that's kind of what needs to happen. Especially VCs are kind of like grandmas in a lot of ways too. We tend to be smart a lot of the times, but we oftentimes don't know specifically. Thank goodness for ChatGPT, because it's such a great way of becoming an expert on a topic very, very quickly. But you're exactly right. Good branding, websites, design can certainly help with that too. Last but not least, Emily, I'd love to hear a little bit deeper of what you're focused on with these.
Yeah. So Thomas, I mean, you're really speaking my language. Like, so I actually started doing this kind of work back in February, so it hasn't been very long. So I'm still learning, but I used to work kind of for the machine. I was a contractor for DoD, and time and time again, met with founders that they were so great at explaining to me the technical underpinnings of their capabilities. They could not string a sentence together to tell me about their vision, to paint a picture for me about the world that they want to create. And that, especially when you're talking to investors, can mean all the difference, right? As Matt just said, I mean, these are some VCs, like they get lost in the technical details and the beeps and boops of what you're building. And you need to be able to compellingly tell a story about what you're doing and why it matters. And then also give them a glimpse into the world that could be created or potentially helped by your technology. So we set out to do this really in two ways. One, consistent, compelling, authentic narrative strategy that's not just for founders, right, but for their teams, so that everyone has a very cohesive, authentic message that is uniquely their brand, right, that's being distributed out into the world with consistency and clarity. And then the other thing, I already mentioned this, but like the ghostwriting part of this, I mean, founders are so busy. Early stage founders, they do not have the time. They just do not have the bandwidth to take content seriously, but they need to, right? And so they, rather than trying to do it themselves and fail, which is what I see oftentimes, I mean, they can instead, hire a team like ours to be this multiplying factor for them to engage in the type of content distribution that they want with the consistency that's necessary to move the needle. So I think obviously a lot of that is just finding a good cadence, finding clarity and conviction in what you want to say. But again, I mean, Thomas, you said this. I mean, we are literally engaging in some form of like speculative fiction to some degree. Like we need to create worlds for people that just, on a normal day couldn't imagine what this particular technology could be used for. Or, I'm lucky that I used to work exclusively in defense. I no longer do. I get to work with companies that are building things sort of just across the frontier space. And so I get to engage in this world building like across the spectrum. It's a little scary when we have to sort of engage that world building, that crystal ball sort of energy in the defense space, because a lot of it can get really scary. But I think there's a way to harness that for good and to make a real impact. So that's what we're hoping to do for founders, help them get that consistency and get that engagement to hopefully move the needle over the long term to whether it's to get technology into the hands of the warfighter or to, completely further disrupt like commercial space, for example. I mean, whatever it takes, we want to help them build those worlds.
We had Emily, I'll stay with you on this one. We had one of the comments or questions for going into this was, why is it important? Why you mentioned the warfighter, they're kind of the end customer in a lot of cases for this or in deep tech. Why does building a good narrative, telling a good story, how does that actually end up benefiting the warfighter or the end user in your case or in your perspective?
Yeah, and I think shout out to Kyle Briggs. I think that was his question.
It was.
Yeah, he's a buddy. So I think there's a couple ways to answer this. So one, I have yet to meet a founder that isn't 100% convinced that they're building something completely net new and unique that no one else is doing. That's just, I mean, you have to operate on the assumption that you have competitors. They're building, maybe there's a 75% overlap in capabilities. You have to just assume that. If that's the case, right, then how are you going to cut through the BS? How are you going to make sure that the market you're trying to build understands that you are the one that's going to lead the market? And you do that through storytelling. How does this impact the warfighter? I think if you firmly believe as a founder that your tech is the only version of a capability, right, that really will flip the script for our warfighters, then it is incumbent upon you to take storytelling seriously, because ultimately, as I mentioned, I mean, there's a sea of technology that people are trying to sell to DoD. It's not everything's going to make it in, right? If you firmly believe and you are on a righteous mission to give our warfighters a fighting chance, then you have to engage in storytelling. You have to make sure that your narrative is understood, that people really believe, right, that your approach and your philosophy to how you run your business, how you build your technology, and how you train the oftentimes how you train the warfighter to use your technology is differentiating.
Yep. I love that. I completely agree. And it's through all those layers that when you can tell a good story, some of these other things can kind of come into position. I think I commented on there too, saying that it can help you in recruiting, it can help you in fundraising, having the best people, having the capital, all those things matter, obviously, when you're building, especially in this space where capital is not just, a nice to have, it's a necessity. You won't be able to get far without it.
Totally. And just to add one more thing. So I'm sure all of us sort of in this space understand this to some degree. Defense specifically is so riddled with sort of like toxic logic and reason. I think people forget in this space that humans are inherently emotional beings. And you could be talking to an end user, sort of a mid-level manager, someone at a PEO, a general, it doesn't matter. Hearts and minds is no joke. I mean, I know that it kind of lost its sort of, oomph after like GWAT, but hearts and minds is a real thing. And that also pertains to selling your capabilities, right? You need to give people the opportunity to emotionally connect with what you're building.
Yep. Federico, on the defense side specifically, because I know that's where I've seen a lot of your work and it's incredible. And shout out to anybody out there that needs any sort of 3D animation. When you're thinking about walking the line, because what I deal with a lot with some of these founders is they have very impressive technology and they want to be able to show it, but sometimes showing too much is either not in their best interest because they have some things they're trying to keep quiet. They don't want to reveal everything, but then they also want to dumb it down a little bit so that it's not overly complex. When you're going through your process, both in consulting these founders that maybe want to go one way or another, how are you thinking about making the complex visualizations work for them on both of those fronts?
So from the project we've been working on so far, I feel like one of the best examples we kind of like came to conclusion for is showcasing full-on mission, so start to end. So you can really showcase what your product is capable of over different type of scenarios. And in that way, you don't get stuck so much on the technicality of things, but you can really show the transformative power that your product can have in the field. Because in a lot of cases, maybe a company is very early on, they don't even have a prototype, and so they don't really have a way to showcase what the product will be capable of. Or even if they have a prototype, it's not that they can really show a full-on mission in a real-world scenario. So with animation, it's like a way to support and show that vision to the end user or the decision makers involved when it comes to their next steps.
I love that. How do you think about walking the line of like vaporware or showing too much? Because in some cases, like to your point, it's in prototype phase, it's early stage. A lot of these things probably change. In your experience, or how you think through, where to draw that line before you're, not stretching it beyond maybe their capabilities, like maybe what you're doing that never happens. Like, how do you walk that line?
So it's a mix of a couple of things. On one side, we work closely with the team because often there are like team members who have experience as operators, so they can guide the direction of the video to make sure we do something that makes sense, it's realistic, it's not some sci-fi, maybe could be totally offshoot. And on the other side, when it comes to the tech itself, we're always very careful in what we showcase. We don't show any internal mechanisms or something that is too detailed about the product itself. We try to stay more on the outside and show the capability on the field to make sure we don't give away any critical information.
I have a question for Federico, if I may. You know, obviously, like Jen and the team at Anduril have done an incredible job setting this like extremely high standard, and in some ways, like kind of set the tone for what brand narrative can do in this world of like hard tech and deep tech and defense, I suppose. And they had this very specific rule that they recently like flipped on, which was never show renderings, like only show actual product. And then like with the release of Barracuda, they went with that whole comic style, which was like really great and, you know, like took over Twitter. And then they just released, I can't remember the new product, but you know, another extension of that aesthetic. How have you dealt with that? I'm sure maybe, you know, that's trickled to your work to a certain extent of founders being like, well, that's not real yet, so maybe we can't show it, or like we don't want to show it because it's not real. And then in terms of like aesthetic, you know, how do you decide what kind of style it should be like? Is it always realistic? Because I think realistic also is just very expensive, right? Like doing photoreal is really tricky to also get right, because the minute you like zoom out on water or like land and you see that it's texture mapped,
it doesn't work anymore.
in tiles, you're like, oh fucking, like you immediately break the illusion. I feel like I'm looking at a video game or something. So how do you guys decide that?
Great question.
So on the style one, I would say 95% of the cases with our clients, we always go with photoreal just because you want to show it as something that is grounded, like that is gonna in real life, actually happening. Then of course it's very much back and forth between us and the team on the client side to figure out where is the right balance, what makes more sense for them and their product, and at the same time try to understand who's their customer, how technical they are, and based on that, it's a bit like a balance of all these things to try to figure out what the story will be from the video. And the style, again, and what you said about the style, I feel like what Anduril did is super cool, but they can do it because they're Anduril, so they can do a PR stunt like that and pull it off in a great way because that's where they are currently. But for a lot of either early stage or some of the other companies you work with are maybe at Series A or around there, I would say photoreal is usually the way to go just because it keeps it more grounded. And when they show it to, I don't know, a high-ranking official, for example, they can connect to that more. That's been like our impression so far, just hearing client feedback after their presentations.
Cool.
That's great. Thomas, one question for you, because I know that you and I we've worked on at least one project together. The one thing that I've always found difficult is when you're meeting with these companies very, very early, and they are in that phase of, hey, we need some excitement, we need some buzz, but we don't want to show hardly anything. And it's very common. How do you think about, as you're going through, walking that line of getting people excited about something while also showing very, very little? How do you think about that? How do you educate some of your customers on that?
Yeah, I think it's always been a great challenge for us and a challenge that we love, because we're like, oh, you want us to demonstrate something that doesn't exist yet? That means we can be way more imaginative. And so I think the most famous one of our projects where we had to do this was actually Rainmaker with Augustus and those guys. Last year in April, I believe, is when we shipped the website. So during the project, they specifically were like, we cannot show renders because we haven't built the stuff yet. And we don't want to seem fraudulent to the market. And so we said, okay, we still need to show what you're going to do in this like idealistic sense, right? And so Emily was talking about this world building that we need to do. I think that's precisely like what we're good at, which is to imagine visually what kind of world you want to build as the founder. One of the first questions that we ask during a kickoff call, we have, a very rigid process of all these questions that we ask because we're really trying to like download on the content as quick as possible so that we can speak the same language. And one of the questions is, what does a world look like in which you've succeeded? And that could be in 50 years, that could be in 20 years, it could be in 100, it could be like long after you're gone. But what does that world you've left behind look like? Because you invented and brought the world what you're making. And in Augustus's view, that was like abundance was the theme, right? It's like we have now eliminated droughts where we don't want them, thus making like crops and yield fruitful to the point where it's just like abundant and beautiful and luscious. And so we kind of paired that with this oil painting aesthetic that we loved. Me and one of my other co-founders studied architecture. The other co-founder studied UI UX, but those two went to high school together. They actually studied in like classical art. And so we're all like very well versed in artistic history and whatnot. And so we were like diving back in and we're like, the Renaissance was an amazing era of like optimism and this new viewpoint of the world. And so we were like, what if we paired that, but like, what if we like plopped in a little drone in the sky that like is so small that people might not even see it, but they're like, oh, what is that? Is that a drone? And suddenly you're in this uncanny valley of, it seems to be an oil painting vaguely reminiscent of California. And then like through the brushstrokes, you can kind of streak rain into the scene without it feeling odd. And so it just kind of worked out for us. And it was a really beautiful end product that, people still to this day hit us up and they're like, hey, we love your project with Rainmaker. We're like, there's like 10 other projects on our website, but people still come to us. They're like, what? Like, that's crazy that you guys pulled that off. But that is one way I think that we just try to infuse our like art history background with our sci-fi nerdiness. And we're like, if we had to like converge those things, what makes the most sense if the founders don't want to show anything detailed?
That's great. And the thing is that I get as a designer, people pointing to that website is like, can I just get whatever Rainmaker did and just have that? Can you just copy and paste that? Is it fair to say that you were the first like oil painting designed website? Because I feel like right after that, dozens of other notable sites came out. I think you might have beat them to the punch before then. Did you kick off a trend?
I don't want to take credit like that. I think that'd be too much. I won't say no at the same time.
There you go. I'll say yes for you. I think it was the first one that I saw, at least.
Well, right before we released the website, literally like a week or so before, Intercom rebranded themselves.
I know, that's
like
the big one.
The kind of chatbot company, who I think their product is great. And their entire aesthetic was oil painting, and we were like, shit, they beat us to the punch. Like, we should have shipped this just out there anyways. But, I don't think anybody was like, you guys copied Intercom. So,
no. And you're differentiated enough. If anything, I feel like Rainmaker had more of a reason to do that design and style.
Absolutely.
The Intercom one, I think, was kind of off the mark. Beautiful, off the mark as far as like a branding guide, I would say. Emily, on your side, before we maybe dive into a different topic here, as you're thinking about working with some of these clients that are maybe, again, in that same spot, they're too early, they don't want to give away too much. What are some of those foundational narrative story building pieces that you can prime them for in that phase where they can't give too much away, but they still need to be able to tell a good story?
Yeah, so this is great. Okay, so obviously we engage in content development, ghostwriting. So there's that. We also help with earned media strategy. So I help founders get placements on podcasts or get profiled in publications and the like. They are very afraid to do this before they come fully out of stealth, or even if they are out of stealth and they're just not confident about, they don't want to give too much away. They're worried about competition. I echo what I said earlier. You have competition. It will always exist. These are things that you cannot avoid. But what you can avoid is how people talk about your product. And so I think in our line of work, I try to be as encouraging as I can to founders to talk to as many people as humanly possible that they believe might be well aligned with what they're building. And I think, so, full disclosure, I myself am also building this kind of stealth creative project. And so I'm starting to experience this for myself of how do I talk about this without really talking about it? You have to find a vocabulary, right, that hints at what you're doing, that doesn't say it directly. You have to find, easily understood sort of comparisons to what you're building. Find, if there are companies that you really, like from a brand perspective, or you think that they're building really innovative shit. I mean, you can say, we're doing what Anduril's doing, but for X, right? Without getting too specific. There are ways to talk about what you're building without really talking about it directly. But as far as talking about it publicly on podcasts or for doing profiles, I mean, I'm living proof right now. I think a lot of founders are afraid, even if they're not in stealth, they're afraid to talk about what they're building because it's so personal to them. It is emotional, right? And I would say there's no such thing as bad PR. I mean, it's this old sort of trope, but it doesn't make it any less true. Chances are you do a podcast like I'm doing this right now, I probably am going to say something that is going to keep me up at 2 a.m., right? I'm probably going to replay something I said in my head. I wish I hadn't said that, or maybe I wish I had said something differently. But the fact of the matter is the general effect of my actions here are going to be net positive. And I wish that founders could just approach talking about what they're doing with that mindset, that it doesn't have to land perfectly. If you are, charismatic, people believe that you have the passion, right, and the wherewithal to follow through on what you're doing, it'll land. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be authentically you.
And that's such a good point. And it's almost the easier way in some cases, hopefully, to be yourself, because then you don't have to second guess it or to prepare something in advance for it. And the funny thing is, most of the founders that we get to interact with on the VC side are such grounded people. They're building these incredible futures, and they oftentimes are forward thinking, but they're some of the most thoughtful people as well. So it's not maybe like some of these other industries where they are more salesmen, they're salesy, and they kind of have to lead. They have these really silver tongues, and they're actually, it's the opposite. You almost have to try to bump up them a little bit to be like, hey, you can a little bit more excitement. Let's go one more degree up, which is almost easier, I think, to do than telling people hey, you need to tone it down because everything you just said is either not true or it's not going to happen. So it's at least a better angle, I think, working in this industry. The other thing, the other question I was thinking, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think defense is unique in that so many of the founders that I engage with, they are former operators. They're people that are intimately connected to this space. And so there is so much of their soul of who they are as a person tied into what they're building. Whereas in a previous life, I worked in B2B SaaS. I'm not trying to speak ill of the B2B SaaS space, but it just, the same level of soul connection just doesn't exist. It's very different. You have people that are just inherently better at selling. Maybe they're not as good at building. I would say that the opposite is true in defense. I have so many people on our client roster that are just incredible individuals. They have so much to give. They're so talented. They are the right people to be doing the work that they're doing, but they have no idea how to sell themselves. And so I wish that these two groups could get together and share notes.
Thomas, on your end, when you think about the differences of working in deep tech or hard tech versus maybe something more traditional or software, was there a specific reason that you mentioned earlier about, it didn't seem like anybody was doing it. Could you imagine being able to do the work that you're doing outside of hard tech, deep tech?
Yeah, I think so. Venture capital is one place that we work that's not quite both. I mean, it's certainly adjacent, but I think there's exciting venture capital firms out there. We just finished a project with Willem and Eric at Terrain.
Oh, it's so good. I love that brand too.
Fantastic duo there. We're also actively working with the Nick and Greg and those guys. So yeah, I think we've pretty much, I think design is a mentality or a philosophy, and I think you can technically apply it to anywhere. the thing that we pride ourselves on, that we've kind of been sharpening our knives over the last 2 years, is just the rigor of our process, I think, is the most fruitful thing, which is really like drilling into anybody who works with us as a designer or a client, like, this is how you think about design and the world, and like how you portray yourself to the public, that we've seen just work. And I think that that framework can technically be applied anywhere else. And I don't think we're really, reinventing the wheel. I think
No.
design agencies live and die because it's really up to the
Or get
founders and
acquired.
saying,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. I think it's really up to the founders to stay relevant and be up to date on current events, current trends, and then eventually, like, you just get old. And then the next young gun comes by and they're like, we have a different process. And they're like, okay. So I think, I guess I'm kind of trying to say, like, maybe at some point the phone will stop ringing, but, we're also a startup. I don't really see ourselves as a design agency. And so we'll continue iterating, etc. But I think the framework and the idea behind the process will probably ring true for like everything we work on in the future, whatever that may be.
I love that. Switching gears just slightly, Federico, on the work that you're doing, what are some of the hot trends that you're seeing from either maybe 3D animation? I would consider one of those hot trends, but maybe talk a little bit on overall trends, but then maybe some specifically as it relates to some of the 3D animation pieces that you're seeing in the work that you're doing.
So I would say overall, from the type of clients that reach out to us, of course, there's a huge boom in the US space, EW, and any type of autonomous system. And when it comes to that, as was mentioned before, most of it goes down as showcasing a mission, how it operates in a real world scenario. And there's definitely also a big push on shooting things for real as well. As Thomas was mentioning, like what Anduril is doing, so a lot of actually like being in the field, showcasing the tech. Of course, it's not possible for everyone, depending on where they are and what stage they are. But I've been seeing more and more companies doing that as well. On the 3D side, I would say the showcasing the mission is probably the biggest one I see so far. There are still a lot of the more old corporate type of 3D animation, like product spinning for a minute and like text, that is still happening for some reason. I'm not sure why.
But about like those caricature, like cartoon ones where it's like the person with the whiteboard and
that kind of thing.
Because I still see it too.
I know and it always looks good. You're like, ooh, that's nice.
So or at least like for what we are doing now, it's all about showcasing the mission, I would say.
Do you do video stuff as well, or is there like an integration with some of the 3D animations into longer form, like launch videos, or where's that kind of mix between how you're seeing your clients use the end product of what you're doing?
So because of the nature of what we want to do, we just want to hyper niche and be the go-to for 3D animation. But for example, we worked at the beginning of the year with Delta Black. It's like UAS company. For where they were at that point, they didn't have anything pretty much, just an early prototype. So we just did the 3D animations to showcase the full set of capabilities. And now we're planning for more animation work, showcasing again mission scenarios, but they will implement that into actual footage of their first products that are about to arrive now. So they will try to like mix and match real world plus what cannot be shot actually in real life with 3D animation.
Do you recommend, I guess, one format or another from like pure video? I feel like video is one of those trends right now, more specifically maybe some of the like commercially type of videos. But do you have any preference that you are encouraging some of your founders, not just the following the mission, but in a format perspective, what you're seeing maybe works the best right now for some of these founders?
In terms of format, again, hearing the feedback from and seeing like how our clients use the videos, the scenario is the biggest thing, showcasing like there's a specific problem, whether it's GPS denied area okay, we develop a UAS that can solve this problem in this way, and just showcasing that scenario is the biggest, probably the biggest way to show your edge, I would say. When it comes to doing video in 3D, to be honest, if you can shoot it for real, of course, it's great. Depending on the situation and where you are, what stage you are, of course, there are different factors that may or may not make it possible. But it's definitely like a big plus. I'm sure it would be like if you can actually show the real product in real life, whether it's flying or doing whatever it is that it can do for the mission. That's great. Of course, certain stuff, maybe like some specific manufacturing, something in manufacturing space connected to defense. You cannot really go like inside the machine to show what's happening. It can be a bit tricky. So that's where those kind of scenarios is where 3D animation can definitely help. But yeah, definitely. If you can film it for real, it's definitely a huge plus for sure. If you already have a product.
Yeah. Emily, on your side, what kind of trends are you seeing for some of these companies that are maybe coming out of stealth or that are building their brands or kind of coming out into the world for the first time? What are some of the trends that you're seeing or maybe more excited for?
Wait, can I quickly add on to
Sorry, who's
Emily?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Can I add on to that question?
Please.
Do you see any trends in like how companies are languaging themselves or how founders are maybe like speaking or engaging with the public?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Okay, so let me back up a bit. So I feel like this is probably the perfect time to talk about AI because typically, so we never want to actually market ourselves. Like part of the whole like foundation of our business is that we ghostwrite. Like we want our clients we want it to seem like they're doing all this hard work themselves. That's our goal. So I'm constantly on the hunt. I reach out to people directly all the time when I say, hey, that post that you made was really great, but I can tell 100% that it was AI. And it's unfortunate because we all use AI, right, to a certain extent. It's how you use it and at what part in your process that really counts. So I think when companies are maybe they're coming out of stealth, maybe they're reaching this like certain inflection point in their momentum, they're on the cusp of a raise, there's some sort of big milestone moment, they need to ramp up their content. What's the first thing that they do? They hit up ChatGPT and they just copy and paste, they regurgitate. The problem with ChatGPT, especially if you don't know what you're doing, right? What you're putting in is being shared across users, potentially, if you don't disable sort of that sharing function. So like you might be writing something that other people are also writing, not quite verbatim, but pretty darn close. And it's going to be very obvious. Sure. So I think what trend am I seeing? It's a negative trend of people knowing that they have to hit the content hard and doing it the wrong way. And I don't fault them for it because these skills these tools are at their disposal. They're easy to use. It seems like the fastest means to an end. It's frustrating. So I try to be sort of the camp counselor of LinkedIn and reach out to whoever I can where I see like, hey, there's so much potential here for you to actually speak authentically about this. Let me help you. So, sort of a roundabout way of answering your question, but I think like in terms of trends, I mean, it's unfortunate. I think that the trends happening in like other media, like in video, right, are very exciting. And they're broadening the scope. They're enhancing worlds, right? I think what's happening with the written word is actually moving in the other direction, which is really sad. And so I'm trying to do at least my part to help founders realize that like there is a better way. Some people just refuse and they want to go, they want to go with AI. I just want to give one shout out. I think Dan Meiji is for anyone listening to this that wants to create a voice on social media that's uniquely theirs, that adds a completely unique, interesting, often, excuse my French, but fucked up spin on the world that we're all living in. Like, you should follow Dan. I mean, maybe he uses AI. I don't think so. I mean, I see typos in his posts. No offense, Dan. I think it's great. Bring them on. I love typos when I see them because I know that someone actually wrote it. I think that what founders should be doing is saying, okay, hey, instead of like talking about my actual business, like again, like the capabilities themselves, why don't I talk about something that interests me, that ties into this greater narrative of how what I'm building will change the world? And I think Dan does a great job of this. So anyone looking for inspiration, go follow Dan Magee right now. Not that he's hurting on the followers front, but go ahead and do it anyway.
And I think this ties back to one of the things you mentioned earlier and hinted at right there too, was his authenticity is pure. And I think it's so much easier to be creative when you're doing it authentically, and not even as a cliche or like, let's just all try to be authentic. I think if you can do it naturally, it's not going to feel like work or effort. It's just like going in and saying what you want to say, and no rehearsing, nothing. I always joke he's a proud member of the Backwards Hat Club too, and he just carries the brand with him everywhere. And I think that's exactly right. I think following into that question a little bit though, and kind of an add on top of that, where's the line? I think that over the last 12 months, certainly with AI, there's been an enormous amount of noise that's entered into the chat through everybody now as a content expert. Everybody's posting all these things. It's now, I think, become harder to stand out. And even if your stuff is good, I have a lot of friends, obviously, that are very good writers. And if you're really good at what you do and the quality is there, I think you'll rise to the top. But I think that if you're in that middle ground of you were a good writer but maybe not a great writer, you're probably getting pushed out by people that are not great writers, that are using AI, and they're just like they're flooding the zone. It's just there's so much going in. How do you think, Emily, that you would give feedback to people thinking about how do I make a splash right now when it just seems like there's too much noise? Do you recommend that they hire somebody like yourself, or do they just have to become better writers? Like what is the right solution there?
So I'm going to say something controversial that maybe the other folks that I work with will be upset by this, but like, I don't necessarily think you need to be a good writer. It also, it depends entirely on like the distribution channel, right? If you're writing a Substack that's supposed to be substantive and longer form, then yeah, you probably need to be a good writer. On social media, whether it's, LinkedIn or like particularly X, you need to be good at really quick, high fidelity intel, right? Like you need to add something to the conversation. I see way too many posts on LinkedIn. They're not adding anything. They're regurgitating what's already being talked about. Boring. Yep. Like you need to, and this is again, not to like just talk about Dan Magee all day, but like you need to insert something new that maybe other people don't have access to. Like, I don't think everyone's on Telegram watching, kamikaze drones in Ukraine. I think that there's a unique subset of this industry that does that in their free time. But we all want to see it. Right. And so if you can be the person that's like adding a new flavor, something new, even if you write it and it's not even the best English, you can tell that you wrote it on your phone. I think, again, like we are hungry for authenticity in a world where you don't, it's just I operate now on the assumption that whatever I'm reading was written by a computer. That sucks. So at least from maybe this is just a highly personal opinion. I'm craving craft, authenticity. I want to know the real you in a sea of bots. So if you can do that, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real.
Have you ever made the mistake of calling someone out for using it, but then they're like, dude, I wrote that for 45 minutes. What the fuck?
So this is it's so funny that you bring this up actually, because another friend in my network made a post about how you need to like stop using the long dash because it's giving you away. And yes, 100% it is. However, I was raised by an attorney who literally had us edit his briefs when we were kids. The written word was like the highest art form in our house. He like beat it, not literally. Everything's okay. He verbally beat into me, right, that the long dash is the way to showcase your sophistication. And so that's like literally how I wrote things in college. And so then when this started happening, I was like, oh my God, am I going to have to like completely change who I am so that people don't think I'm using AI, which I have because now I'm freaked out about it because I care so much about me having an authentic voice. So yeah, it's rough out there. There have been people that I've called out who I think, listen, everyone uses AI. Anyone that tells me that they don't, it's just very hard for me to believe them because I literally don't know a single person that doesn't use it in some capacity. And I'm one of them. I do.
I think you'd be silly
I use it for
not to,
research
honestly.
and especially for, and I don't know if you guys experience this at all, but like as a I mean, I don't like calling myself a startup, right? As a small business, right? I can either hire someone, which is very expensive, or I can take the time doing the work that I'm already doing, but training an AI to basically be a mini me operationally. That to me is worth everything. I don't think I could be a small business owner without AI, truthfully. I just don't think it would be possible. So there are benefits of it, but like you have to be careful. And I just think if everyone is relying on AI to build their brand and to convey their vision, everyone's visions are going to end up looking the same.
Yeah,
And that would be a huge
Thomas,
bummer for this
I want to hear
space.
some hot
it's a
takes
great
from
point.
Thomas on AI a little bit. How are you thinking about AI? Maybe not even internally, but similar. It's obviously being used. It's widespread. Every design agency, everybody that I know is using AI extensively. What are your thoughts on that trend? Obviously, taking over.
I'm pretty bullish on it. Full stop. I mean, we couldn't have done oil paintings like we know how to do it. It would have taken a month to put out one iteration. And then they're like, "What if we change the tree?" And we're like, "Fuck, okay, that's gonna be another month." Like,
Yeah, you got to go bring that
it's just
artist
not.
in, and then
Yeah, it's just
change
not.
it. Yeah.
Hey, can you come back, man? So it's just not. It made things possible for our small team that just wasn't possible 2 years ago. Um, and whether you want to say like, well, you're taking the jobs away of like Renaissance painters. I'm like, show me a Renaissance painter. So there's
But
caveats,
even
but
besides Renaissance painting, obviously, there's still a lot of like the background
absolutely,
images that we're using right now. I could have probably hired somebody for those things too. All AI generated, all within a few minutes. But
absolutely. I think there's push and pull always with new emerging technology. Pulling out an architecture metaphor every time someone asks me about this question, I say, okay, well, look at the architects who are still drawing by hand in the 90s and like the late 80s when CAD became a thing and AutoCAD was like slowly becoming the standard. It allowed us to it allowed us to build buildings still. It optimized our work, if not made it more precise, which, I think we would want our buildings to be more precise so they don't fall down. Not that, I don't know what the statistic is. I'm sure maybe there's something out there that's like, buildings started falling down less after AutoCAD. But, I always look at my friends and I go, how many architects do you see still drawing by hand?
yeah,
None. Zero. And it's not like suddenly when it was introduced, the field of architecture went to shit, although I think it went to shit now. But that's totally detached from like technology. I think it's real estate developers. But I've always said it helped us do our jobs better. And I think AI is doing the exact same thing. It's allowed us to be more imaginative, and it's allowed us to work at a pace that maybe we all wanted, but like physically could not do. And whether that makes you work more or not, like that's a totally different conversation. But I just, last week I had an idea in the studio. I was like, what if we took this really lovely essay? There's an essay that we make anybody who work with us read before they work with us, because during the interview, I want to ask them, what'd you think about it? It's called The Last Question. It's a very short essay by Asimov. It's a very profound one as well. And suddenly, on a random Friday last week, I was like, we should make a movie out of The Last Question. And people were like, yeah, that'd be cool. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go try. And so I like stitched together 6 different softwares and just like put out a 30-second short that I made entirely using AI. And I was like, that was pretty incredible. Like, I don't think this is going to be at Cannes Film Festival, but like, I think I just did that in an hour and a half. And what can I do if I devote a whole week or a month to it? I think hopefully like David Holtz's whole, the founder of Midjourney, who's a client of ours as well, his whole thesis is like, I don't want to make a tool that eliminates art. I want the tool that essentially allows everybody to be creative, because everyone's a designer. In my opinion, everyone's a designer to a certain extent. It's like people who say they're not, I'm like, you chose to put your night table where it is, or you chose to angle your couch in a certain way. To me, those are like all micro design decisions that people innately have. And so, these tools now allow people who maybe like didn't get trained on how to use a paintbrush to like paint something. And like, will that person take a graphic designer who went to traditional art school's job? I don't think so. I think like, but I think if the graphic designer chooses to ignore it because they're being stubborn, yeah, maybe. I don't know. And that's partly at fault because you chose to ignore it and not like use it to make your own work better, which I think is absolutely how we should approach AI in the creative fields. It's not like the thing that's going to help you do your job in 1 hour. It's hopefully the thing that'll make your work just much, much better and much more robust than what it could have been before.
I've seen it. I think it raises the bar across the board is kind of what I've seen. It raises the bar for folks that are not good writers, certainly not good. I think design to me is the one where it, especially artists, like being artistic and actually drawing something or creating that imagery to evoke feeling is very difficult. I think very, very few people could even do that. I think more people could write, they could spend time and sit down and write, a blog post if they really wanted to. And maybe it takes 3, 4, 5 hours to get there versus somebody who's a really good writer and could do it in, 30 minutes or something like that. But to create like the things that you were creating on Rainmaker's website and doing those, it would be impossible. Like I could not do that. I could not do that at all, no matter how much practice or training. I cannot do that. So it's almost like it's allowing all these folks to enter the chat where else they, in other areas they couldn't. I'm really curious, Federico, if there's how much AI is being used on the 3D animation side in that world, because I feel like similar to illustration and photography and those, there's a gap where somebody like myself would not have been able to do anything in that space, but probably could now with some of the tools that are existing. What are your thoughts on AI as it relates to 3D animation in that whole world?
So from our side, it's definitely like a great tool. For the time being, we mainly use it on the concept phase, early stages. If we need to like quickly iterate, for example, if we need to show a specific environment where the tech is going to be used, and we quickly iterate with the client to show them like a bunch of options. So then when we actually go into production, the timeline is more effective. How they use the budget, we will use the budget is more effective. So overall speeds up the process quite a lot in the concept phase and throughout the rest of the production. It's not maybe there yet in terms of like production ready specifically for the type of work we do, in the sense that a lot of the products we work with, to show them in a way that makes sense, they need to have a certain level of technical accuracy. And just where AI is right now, can do maybe a great cinematic shot of a random car chasing or something, but when there's not really a way to implement a CAD model from the client in a very accurate way where it's like 100% how it is, without having some crazy distortions and weird stuff going on. So, I mean, if it gets to that point, that would be great, because it means we can deliver to the client faster, better prices, and we can just do more for them. So when the time comes, it's definitely something we'll implement, but for now it's just concept phase pretty much. Storyboarding.
So let's assume that does happen, because I think it will. I think it's going to end up getting to a point where you could speak into a prompt, speak into existence exactly what you want. So maybe in your world, Federico, specifically, what would then separate you versus now having anybody, like the founders themselves, speaking this into the world versus somebody like yourself or designer thinking about these things? Where's the separation, I guess, when there's an equal playing field with the tools that allow us to have the same skill set?
So I guess one of the big ones is just translating their vision, because in a lot of cases when the founders come to us, they start to speak for an hour about all the technical details, but they don't really necessarily have a vision of like just classical storytelling, beginning, middle, and end of how to showcase the capability of their product. They over-focus on the technical side of things. So having more of an advertising, storytelling background, I think that's where we can help overall with both on the production side, but in general, the concept phase as well.
It's so true. I think you're exactly right. I think there's always going to be a need. The question that I get all the time is, why is there going to be a need for designers or creatives or really any of the fields that we play in, even VCs to an extent? And obviously the cliche thing right now is taste. Everybody's talking about taste. And I do think that there is something to say there, but I think there's two layers, and you hinted on it perfectly. it's not just taste, because a founder might have the perfect idea of what they want to do and they can bring it out into the world. But there's also this idea that it's really difficult, I think, for most people to put the mirror on themselves and be able to articulate something that's going to resonate maybe in a good way. And I think what everybody here has, having worked with a lot of different clients and different people, is you have the contextual awareness of what's going to work for them. So you almost lead more with, what's the objective here? And you know the path to get there probably better than they do. What you need from them, tying back to what you said, Emily, you need the authenticity. You want to make sure that that's shining through, but that combination of also putting in it with the contextual awareness professional pieces that you've collected over the years as well. So I think that's great.
I wanted to add is, Federico, you just mentioned like when the tools get to where they could or are going, like you could deliver faster, you could offer lower prices, et cetera. I think that's one place that I actually disagree or hesitate on in terms of like AI powering our workflows. Like I think the process, as I mentioned earlier, should remain the same amount of rigor. It's not like just plop something in, get something out, and like, boom, it's on the website. Like, that would be bad. And I think as creatives, I always tell people in our studio, like, you're not an artisan, you are actually a stonemason. I mean, I guess you could be both, but you are here for the rigor. You are coming into the studio every single day and like chipping at a block to get to the David eventually. But like, you don't just plop Davids out every single day. I think you have to work at the craft. And I think using AI does not mean you've like created a shortcut from A to B. It's actually like, you should be applying the same amount of thought and care that you would if you were going to make this image yourself. Pull it out, edit it, tweak it, like analyze it, go back to the drawing board. And you have to go through all those processes to truly be creative. Because I think there is a world, the dangerous side of AI, which I think is what you said, which is like, well, the guy just knows what he wants. Like, can't he just type that in and get the thing out? And then boom, he's done. That's not true. And I think that to me is where AI will lack, which is that combination that you have to do in a creative process, which is I understand current events, I understand meme culture, I understand color theory, I understand like what they might say or shouldn't say, and then I'm combining all of those things to create this thing that I've arrived at. There's, you should be able to defend your decisions, and I think that's what AI couldn't do necessarily.
What are your thoughts on that, Emily?
So many thoughts. So I think, I really think we are simpatico, I think, in how we view this. Like, I struggle with, we're going to get a little existential here, a little deep. We suffer as a society. I mean, it's not just America. This is a global issue, right? Like, we are impatient as hell. We have no patience. This is part of the reason why, like, I'm completely obsessed with reindustrialization, right? And this massive wave of effort and energy that's come about. But I struggle with whether or not us as a society can handle, like, manufacturing takes patience that I don't know that we understand anymore. As as the older people get older, like, and the younger people that really don't understand this will come into the workforce, they definitely don't get this. I mean, I think AI, like you said it exactly, like, it's one tool in an arsenal of human tools, right? This should augment your existing process. I think in terms of like written content, you can use AI to create a bunch of content, schedule it, and forget about it. That is not going to help you be influential because you are missing that real-time component of actually engaging with other people on things that are happening right now. And so there will always be a need for humans to engage and to be part of this process. Like, you can't just set it and forget it, churn things out. Sure, costs go down, but like, if you're setting this expectation, again, Thomas, to what you said, like, you can't set an expectation with your clients that you're just going to like sort of plug something in, spit something out, boom, instant. Like, you are going to work yourself to the bone. I also don't think people realize, like, even if you're using AI heavily, it's still really time consuming. Like
It is.
it takes so much, like to the extent that I use AI, like it's actually really time consuming. Like I feel like I spend more time with my chat GPT than I do with like my friends and my family, because it's like you gotta like whip it into shape. You have to really get dialed in with prompts. I mean, it is not easy. So to say like, we can like 10x our output with AI, sure, but like you're also gonna have to like, there's gonna be some increase in effort on your part as well until we get to a point where it's fully autonomous, which I don't really understand how that might really be and still be meaningful. Like, I just don't see a world where that can really exist. I hope that answered the question. Sorry, I'm on a tirade.
That was a perfect answer. There's a perfect answer there. I'm actually kind of curious. Both of you kind of hinted at this, and you mentioned it, Thomas, of you're going in, let's say that you have a set amount of time that you're thinking about a project or doing something. You mentioned that in a way, it's not that they're going to be getting there faster. Would you say is the quality then getting better? Is that what's happening with AI? Is that AI is allowing them to have the final output be better? Is it a combination of both? Or where do you see maybe the benefits of AI coming together? Is it that the quality increases? Is it that you get faster at getting to quality? Or is it a combination of both? Or where does it lean, do you think, more than the other, if that makes sense?
Who's that question for?
For Thomas, sorry.
Emily,
No, go for it. I mean, I have thoughts, but please, the floor is yours.
I think, my answer is simple. I think it just allows us to cast a much wider net for you to like get a much better end product eventually, because we had the capability to look at a bunch of things that in the past we maybe couldn't have gone as wide on, but we're like, because we have this technology, why don't we go explore these things? Versus like back in the day, it would have been incredibly time consuming to be like, who are the best oil painting artists we know? Who are the best like Art Deco specialists we know? Who are the best Art Nouveau specialists we know? And then like go find them, contract, like it would have taken so long. Versus now, it just allows us to explore a bit more, which is the really fun part for us. And we're like, here's like a much bigger pool of potential. And then we whittle it down, obviously, and you'll always get the same results. So I don't know if it's like an increase in quality necessarily. Maybe it is, but I think it's more that you get to cast a wider net.
I love it. Emily, on your side, do you think that does it help improve quality or speed, or where's the better win there?
I think, to sort of piggyback on what Thomas said, like I think it increases optionality, right? Like so it does obviously affect speed. I don't know if it really leads to better quality. And I'll say this. We all think about like the echo chambers that like result from using social media. At a certain point, so when I do use AI, I have to clear it pretty frequently. I have to sort of like nuke my environment, because I find that it just sort of like starts to sort of like double down on itself and reiterate, and then you find yourself as sort of in this like, it's giving you a lot of the same.
Especially if you've given it that affirmation once on like one thing that it said, like, oh, that was a good answer.
And
it doubles down, triples down again.
Totally. This is so fascinating. I was just reading last night. It actually kind of scared the shit out of me, but apparently AI responds really well to threats of physical violence, which is just terrifying. Hey guys, this is the world we live in. So, hate to break it to you.
Was it CEO of Google that mentioned it, or like mentioned something? I can't remember, but
you know what? This was at the wee hours of the morning, and I couldn't tell you. I'll have to go back and I'll send it to God. But it's like, if you're not like really aggressive with AI to get it to sort of like course correct or bring in new things, it's like it's just going to keep sort of like regurgitating itself, which I just think like there's no way that's going to lead to better quality. I just don't believe that. But what I said, I think it could lead to more optionality. Like I think that like Thomas is right. Like it's a great research tool. Like if I'm writing a long form Substack post where I know I need to bring in lots of sources, I need to bring in data, I need to bring in like lots of different things that I just as a single human do not have time to do, to do all of that on my own. It's a great starting point. It also gives you optionality in the sense that like you can write something organically. Like I do this all the time. I'll actually write something just me in a vacuum, disconnected. I'll then plug that into AI and I can come up with different versions of my voice. different versions of, hey, I wrote this long form thing, but I also really want to hint at this on LinkedIn, or I want to make an X post about what I wrote long form. It helps you do that. That, I think, is the proper way to use AI. Like, you're still using your brain. Like, I worry about critical thinking, about people being able to actually
Absolutely.
write. What if you were a great writer and now you've used AI so much that you go to write and you just
I think
stare
it's
at a blank
actively
screen?
happening.
It's
I think it's
terrifying.
actively
It
happening.
scares me. It scares me. I catch
Yeah.
myself relying on ChatGPT too much for basically everything that I used to
Well,
use Google for, right? And it's scary.
yeah.
So
When ChatGPT went down for like, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours,
time
whatever, a
stood
few weeks
still,
ago,
right?
I was like looking at my co-founder who was like actively using it. I was like, oh no, how are you gonna fucking think, dude? He was like, shut up.
It's so true. It's like the new version of the Wi-Fi going down. You're like, my job is email. How do I do my
Yeah.
Yeah.
job? Yeah, it's the same.
You
It's
can't
the
write
same thing.
emails.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So
It's, I think, younger generations specifically. I have younger cousins that are in like the high school, early college years, and they echo some of the same things where it's almost become the go-to, the same way that we would not cheat, but we would be like, oh, what's the answer to that? Go to Google and get the answer right away. AI is taking it a step further, where it's like, not only am I Google searching the answer of, this particular time in history, but I'm going to have it actually write the paper for me. It's like a whole extent of it going forward. It'll be interesting to see in future generations that are in those kind of pivotal early years, and especially in their careers, think of what happens if that makes them better. Like a generation that's brought up with AI, are they superhuman in a way in this new world, maybe different than what we would say? Or are they going to fall behind because maybe they lack a little bit, back to the earlier point, of authenticity, because it's not really their own voice? They've kind of adapted into this voice that they've been told is the right way of doing things. And over time, does that change? One question I kind of have. No, go ahead, Emily.
no, this is just fun. You can probably cut this out, but I I'm a
Oh, I
woman,
can't.
and so
No,
I
yeah.
read gossipy stuff. Like, I love
Yeah.
scrolling on Instagram and reading terrible stuff about celebrities. There's this
Yeah.
thing called Mar-a-Lago face, where like every woman is starting to look the same. And I fear that is happening to the written word. It's happening with how we communicate. At some point, we're all going to converge into the same personality. And what a bleak future that would be, right? It's one thing for us
I
to all have the
refuse to
same
believe it.
nose, but
I refuse.
yeah, I can't do it.
There's the question I was going to ask. This is something that I think of a lot, and maybe Federico I want you to kick it off with your answer. I think of my kids are young. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I always like to think of it like when they graduate high school. It's like close enough to where, it could be, 15 or so years, but it's long enough away where we're going to see so many things advance during that time. Do you think, as a consumer, some of the things, I have this bold belief that over 50% of the things that we consume as entertainment in 10 years will be self-generated AI. The music we listen to, the books that we read, the things that we watch, the podcasts we listen to, or instead of going out and finding people doing them, the artists today doing it, that instead it'll be, you know what, today I want to listen to a podcast about an expert in this topic, talk to another podcaster about an expert in this topic, and it's going to create it. It's going to be exactly what you'd want. It'll be correct factually and all these things. What are your thoughts on that future? Do you think that will happen or will not happen?
I saw, I think yesterday, a comparison video between the Will Smith eating spaghetti 2 years ago and the one done now. Insane. Like, what happened in 2
It is
years?
crazy. We forget how bad it was just even a year ago.
Yeah, exactly. See what can happen in 2 years. To be honest, like 15 years wouldn't surprise me if Netflix now is going to make a full-on series based off the prompt, and you can, or actually, you can almost like self-generate based on your interest, what you want to see. So it's not like your Netflix looks like anyone else's Netflix, but based on what you like, Netflix will auto-generate the show for you or the movie for you, whatever it is. And yeah, again, seeing the difference in 2 years from like a silly video like that, 15 years, all the money that is going into this is going to be just more and more. It sounds very doable. Then, of course, you never know because there are like 1,000 factors, but sounds very doable.
But let's
to me
assume
also.
that technologically it happens. So let's assume that in 10 years it is as good as that, if not better. It's like it's indistinguishable from the art that we would think about today, the music, the podcast, all of those things. from a human habit piece, that's the question is, do you feel like it'll be something where we will be okay and entertained consuming AI content because it's self-generated? Like I was the one that went to Netflix and said, hey, I want a show that's about this and this combined with this, and that 30 minutes of this happening. So I'm the artist and I'm absorbing something that I feel like I created. Do you feel like that is something?
I would say the optimistic side of me says that people will not want to accept that future. But then when you see a lot of the trends that are happening and what's going on social media, would you just like go for it and not really care anymore at some point? But yeah, the optimistic side would tell me that we will actually care to actually watch real stories from real people. Like, for example, what you said about the podcast, I would feel weird about like listening to AIs talking to each other about some topic. Maybe you're watching a documentary that is totally made up. So I still have hope for it, but just seeing a lot of trends in general, it's a bit of an uncertain future, I would say, in that sense.
Emily, is that future going to happen? Are my kids going to be listening to
I
those things?
hope
I'm still
not.
convinced, even after that. And I think it's funny, you mentioned, Federico, that you're optimistic that that won't be the case. It's, again, a whole other long conversation, and we don't have to go into it, of whether it is better or worse. Because I think that all of us here are growing up in a world where we care about the artists behind the music that we listen to, for example. But I see my kids and what they're doing, and my son is 6, and he loves using ChatGPT, and he uses it all the time to create stories and to create graphics and those types of things. And the feeling that he gets is that he created those things and he loves to do them. So last night, we have our 2-year-old, he talks to ChatGPT and he says, I want a story about my brother and I going to the zoo and doing X, Y, and Z. It spits out a story that's perfect. And he's beaming with, like, he thinks he did that and he's excited about it. And we're not going to have, so in his case, but then when I show him a book that somebody else had written, or we listen to an audiobook that somebody else had written, he does not care for it. He does not care for the artist behind the scene. This perspective is coming from, whether I like it or not, I do think there's a whole generation of kids that are going to grow up with AI being this piece. And then because they're going to have so much self-control over what it is, that they're going to be the artists and go from there. Emily, your last take. This will be the last AI thing we talk about.
I'm sorry. I feel like I took us on this really deep AI tangent. My apologies,
we were gonna hit it. Yeah,
it's inevitable, right? Like I have little kids too. I totally get what you're saying. Without speaking negatively about our children, because I don't know your kids, but I'm sure they're incredible, as are mine. To me, that is like participation trophies. Like you're not. I don't know. Maybe that is aggressive. I feel like this is why we live in this really interesting dichotomy where it's like, yes, that's going away. We're like in this like almost like post DEI world, like post participation trophies. And yet, like, I feel like exactly what you just said about AI, like we have people that are there. I guess there's artistry in prompts. Certainly there is, because prompting is like, their entire business is just built on helping you come up, like giving you good prompts. I mean, there's art in that. God, it would be so sad if like my children don't know how to write a sentence. I don't know, the thought of that, it just makes me so sad.
Especially the way that you said you grew up. Like it would be such a very like 2 generations, and it's very different.
So I don't know. I think I fear though that like the train has left the station a long time ago. So I don't know how much there is we can do about it. What I will say to kind of bring this back to, you know, the world that we all play in, like I see reindustrialization as like this really incredible proxy for all of these things that are wrong with society that we have the opportunity to fix. I think the millennial generation is like, we're the last sort of bastion of like a world before toxic convenience, a world before everything being connected. But we also deeply we really do understand, like, you know, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, that like they only know this, and we empathize with them. We also empathize with older people. I feel like we're the only ones that can really solve this problem. And if we don't try to figure that out now, it's going to be too late. And not to be hyperbolic and like really extreme, but like we need to figure out, if we can figure out how to build things again as a country, we can figure out, I think, how to reincorporate patience and like tangible like reward for our hard work. And I feel like with AI, the way it's going, that those things are going away. Patience, goodbye. Tangible reward. I mean, the fact that people are feeling reward from telling something what to do, that's troubling.
Yeah. Thomas, final piece on any of that, and you can skip if you want. But final piece on AI. Maybe it's like a good, bad, a little bit in the middle. Do we see it putting us into this utopia where everything is the same? Design kind of goes away. It's all kind of one similar thing.
I think it's going to be just a black swan year after year. I don't know if we're going to know what's going to happen next year. Like,
Yeah.
the world has changed so much in 2 years, 3 years. I think everything we talked about is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then and that's unstoppable. I think, to Emily's point, the thing that is actionable is going to be how we approach the adoption of all of these things, that I think will be really important. And it'll be up to our incredible parents. There's two of them on here. Our incredible parents, our incredible teachers, and like the people who did have those things, like tangible things that they're used to or have grasped before and understand the idea of process and patience. And I think it'll be up to those people, certainly, to make sure that it falls into the hands of our youth in the best way possible. And who knows what that's going to look like, but
no.
I have faith. I think we'll, I don't think we're going to be satisfied with like where this thing goes. And so maybe the next turn of it, the next iteration of it will actually be like, you know what? Patience was pretty cool. We should bring that back. And that'll be like a part of a product again, or the ideas and the fundamental logic behind creativity will change, but maybe the roots of it, the creativity that fueled all those things will, I don't know, surface again at some point where we are not just like expecting a thing to tell us exactly what it is we want. There's actually, new ways of thinking around the process of, well, that's where you start. And like, here's all the ways you can iterate through it. And just because it spit a thing out doesn't mean that that's the final thing. It actually means like you have just gotten started. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever received in design school was actually funny. That was the last time I was in Austin, which is where I am right now for just a couple of days. I was going to the University of Texas as like their architecture summer program as a high schooler to see if I wanted to do architecture before spending a lot of money in university. And I was struggling to think about a design when I was given a brief. My professor looked at me and said, just put your fucking pencil on the paper. And I started doing that. And I think every time I got stuck, I'm just like, I just need to do that. I need to get started. And hopefully that's maybe the mentality that we take with at least creative tools. It's like, that is not the end all be all. It's a way for you to get started, but like use it as a great launching point. And understand that there's a whole world out there in which you can still employ to make something beautiful.
That's great. I think that summarizes, I think, a lot of the feelings of everybody on here too. I think because of people like all of you doing some of this work, the bar is always going to be higher. So as much as I say that there's going to be a lot of content created, generated that maybe for a lot of people will be considered good enough, there's always going to be really creative people that are pushing the envelope, raising the bar, and it'll always be better. So there's always going to be this appreciation for the human element simply because humans will continue to produce better results with some of these tools. And I think that'll always be something, because that's what turns us onto these things to begin with. The music that we listen to, the design, the painting, all these things is because we're inspired by the capabilities of what these people behind the paintbrush have done. I think that will continue to be the case. The tool obviously maybe changes and it's not a paintbrush. Maybe it is AI prompts. But I think that if you are a true artist or if you studied art, you will be better at those things, and the bar will be raised there.
One last thing. I hope not what your kid is doing is after he generates a short story that he goes and shows it to his friends.
Yeah.
And goes, hey, what do you think? And they like have a beautiful conversation and they're like, well, what if the tree like was taller or it had a beard? And like, what if the tree was blue? and they're like, oh, that's interesting. And that generated some new idea. And like, that's amazing in my opinion.
That's what I
and I
think will
hope that
happen. By
that's
the
the
way, I
case.
think that, I mentioned like, 20 years, my son's like going to the gym and he's like, hey, I want a song that's like this and this mixed together. And it creates a song. He's going to immediately share it with like his 5 friends. They're going to remix it and kind of do their own things on it too. The story that my son did create, he actually then drew it horribly, but drew it at least on real paper.
Great.
And did bring it to school and did show it to his friends. So it's
That's
like
fantastic.
a spark of creativity that maybe, would otherwise not be there too. So I'm still very hopeful. I just hope it expands. It doesn't limit us, I think, going forward. Last round the horn kind of pieces of questions in here. Federico, what is the most exciting area of deep tech in your mind, whether it's for you being able to design for it, create for it, or just in general that excites you the most right now?
So I would say for something we're actually working on right now is underwater UVs. So we're actually doing something like UV company. It's some pretty cool stuff. But I would say both ocean and space are kind of like quite cool topics for stuff we're working on right now. So I'm just curious to see what are the next companies coming up going to bring to the table.
I mean, I haven't heard ocean is the new space.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of where it's at. There's so much to discover there. I also agree. I think that ocean companies have such an unfair branding advantage because it's just, for whatever reason, it's so cool to be able to think and talk and design around the ocean.
Some might say there's a sea of opportunity.
Oh my goodness! You can forgot that there's
a good one.
Here. You have all the mom jokes that you can go with this. But also difficult probably for you, Federico, because the water's tough. Water's a tough thing to design for, to create visuals for. It's almost impossible to do. Liquid is just weird.
A lot of technical challenges with that for sure.
But maybe that's why you like it. Maybe that's why it's exciting.
Yeah, definitely like a whole new creative problem-solving side of things, like totally new environment, literally.
Well, if you are a maritime blue tech company, you know where to go to get some incredible 3D stuff there. Emily, you mentioned the new industrial revolution that we're going through right now. Is that where you're going to land, or where would you say is the most exciting piece in this deep tech wave that we're seeing?
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to say something controversial.
Yeah.
Gosh, do I love a company that just only builds for defense and nothing else? I have dual use fatigue.
Is that because of the DoD background that you have? Okay.
Ooh, yeah, it's like I have dual use fatigue, and you can spread the word on that. I literally am like, there are just some companies that should not be dual use, and they need to stop wasting their time trying to be. I don't really. I would say, given my time, working for the on-ramp hub, like I love kind of like an unsexy, really elegant solution. Like I've worked with some really cool companies in sort of like the contested communication space, contested logistics, like not sexy stuff, but like holy shit, really moving the needle. And those stories are really hard to tell. How do you tell a really compelling story about comms? That's a challenge, but I love it. In terms of like reindustrialization, I mean, I think the thing that excites me so much about when I meet a really young founder, I don't really care what they're building. If there's some sort of like really like, compelling hardware component to what they're doing, and I know that there's potential for them to build it here in the United States, like that really gets me fired up. Like there are a handful of young founders, 20, 21 years old. These are people that have their entire lives ahead of them. And they are people that were born to build. This is not the only thing they're going to build. Like I want to invest in those people. Those are the people that are going to make this country run, in terms of manufacturing. So, I care less about the tech, more about the people and their passion behind what they're doing.
I love that. Thomas, favorite industry that you're thinking of right now? Maybe it can be multiple. You don't have to pick favorites, but is there anything that's exciting you the most right now?
I don't think so. I think they kind of excite me equally across the board.
Is it similar to what Emily said, where it's more because of their the inspiration behind what they're building?
Totally. I mean, I think the energy is definitely contagious. This is my third company. I'm also someone who just wants to build stuff and like watch things grow. And so it's exciting for me to both be growing my own thing and then be able to assist these incredible people on achieving their vision as well. I don't think there's a particularly fascinating industry for me that's like over another one, because I think they're all incredibly equal. And I think the seat that we have been, so graciously offered to like sit in this position has been so amazing for us, because it feels like we get to watch all the different hockey pucks emerging to where we think they're going to go. And ideally, that's to kind of advance our civilization to like the next step. Talking about things like the Kardashev scale, I think like I hope that that's where we're headed, and I think that's where we're going.
It's funny. I think one of the other trends that I'm excited about, that's already happened. There's a lot of it doing it, but I think there's going to be some really cool venture capital angles given to creative folks and agencies. There's already agencies that are doing this. But when you have the ability to tell a story and the ability to meet some of these companies, Emily, to your point, you're meeting 20, 21-year-olds that are just about to start in these adventures. VCs, we don't have that access typically. You're not at that point of needing help or being there. So I think we'll start seeing more venture capital get put into agencies and creatives to help allocate, because you're going to have, I think, first access into not only the companies, but these exact trends that are going to be surfacing as well.
And I think I mean, to give you guys kudos, I think Harpoon and Black Flag, I mean, you guys are doing something really unique. Like, there are definitely naysayers out there that I think maybe there's a bit of jealousy baked into that. People in the space that are like, well, like it can't just be about hype, it has to be about outcomes. And I'm like, I really firmly believe that you guys are outcomes oriented. You just also happen to be really kick-ass marketers. And it's possible to be both. I appreciate that. And so like, I think that you guys are a great case study in what's possible when you use your imagination and you actually try to make things fun and exciting and entertaining and not just about making. I mean, obviously you guys are trying to make money, but like it's about so much more than that. You guys are creating like a cultural movement, and I think that's really palpable.
That's great. I will say though, I appreciate that. Thank you. We're probably also equally to blame for the dual use stuff. Maybe not us specifically, but certainly VC as a whole. Because the most common question I hear, not necessarily at Harpoon or anywhere, but when I'm like sharing and passing along deals, the very first question is like, what's the dual use application here? And so we're the ones that are warping that narrative for all these poor companies that are like, I just want to build for defense. I don't know how my technology could be used for airport security or something.
Yeah. But it's not, sorry, I know we're going to go way over time. It's not just you. I mean, or not just you. It's not just like VCs. It's like, it's coming from from DOD. I mean, like you look at NSIC, right? Like National Security Innovation Capital, like they only invest in companies that are dual use. Like that to me is problematic, because if we're truly going to flip the script on our adversaries, there's a lot of technology that needs an influx of capital that will never have a dual use, and that's okay. I just think it's how we talk about it and how we think about how to fund these things. I just think everyone's looking for a dual use, and I think for VCs to have that approach is fine, because you guys need to make money. DoD needs to save lives. They have their outcomes are very different.
So true. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. That was fantastic. I had a lot of fun chatting through all these things. I'm glad we went down the AI rabbit hole, and I'm glad we were able to tie it all back together. Really, really quick. Again, Emily, starting with you, share where people can find you, anything that you're looking for, what you're looking for right now, and we'll close things off around the horn.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm always looking for interesting and compelling founders that need help with their content. You can go to our website, OPFOR.media. It is sparse for a reason. We don't want to say too much because we want to hear from you and create something entirely bespoke to what you're building. The other thing, I've sort of hinted at it throughout this conversation, but I'm also leading this massive creative project around America's Industrial Renaissance. If that movement speaks to you, if you're involved in it in some capacity or you want to be, please connect with me. We are looking for people to champion what we're doing as well as participate in it directly. That's all I'll say. Super cryptic.
I love it. No, that's perfect. That's the great way to
breadcrumbs
in the story.
Yeah.
So mysterious.
Thomas, how about you?
Yeah, we are a small studio, but we're growing. Any designers, graphic designers, art directors out there who want to participate in this incredibly exciting frontier, hit us up. We are actively looking for some new folks to join the team. Otherwise, if you're a founder who is building in this world and wants to visualize a new future and wants to do it with a studio who's willing to be in the trenches with them, please hit us up. We'd love to talk to you. We're at asimovcollective.com. And yeah, looking forward.
Love it. Thank you. Federico, last but certainly not least.
For us, if you have some cool defense tech you're working on and want to showcase it in a clear way for potential customers or investors, you can find us at Sentinel Studios.
Love it. Thank you all again. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Hopefully it's great for some of the listeners in here. And I'm excited to maybe chat again in a year or two when we'll see how some of these things have changed.
Sounds good.
Can't wait.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Hoist the black flag high, let the cables hum. Code and cannon ready, futures beating like a drum. Charts are drawn in circuits, treasure maps and AI. We're sailing for the edge where bold ideas never die. Pirates only.